Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You join me from a sweltering city of London, the right side of the pond, he says, and then looks nervously at
LOL.
Angie. Welcome to the Grey Market Blast with myself and the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer, where Angie, as usual, will be providing us with the ultimate rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, and so I don't get a spanking, I'll get the legals out of the way. Nothing discussed on this space session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed capital G glamorous Angie Setzer. How are you, my love?
Woohoo! I'm awesome.
Woohoo!
How are
Thanks
you?
for
Are you good?
asking.
I know, I'm super. Thanks for asking. How is it over there? Is it, 100 degrees, not Celsius, obviously?
It feels like it, obviously, because we're a proper city, an old city. Everything's very
Right?
much stone and narrow, and there's no wind. So as soon as I get off this, I'm going to go and have a limoncello spritz. I think
Ooh, that sounds very nice.
pretend
Very
I'm on the
nice.
Amalfi Coast.
Yes, that sounds, I would do that, have two, one in my honor.
Oh, I
So,
will do.
so yeah, all right. Well, let's party. Welcome back. We missed yesterday, which was totally fine. My brain.
My fault.
No, and I was so relieved because I was like, I'm not prepared. My dog ate my homework. It just was one of those days where I'm like, I don't even know what to talk about, even though there's so much. And here we are today, another day. Happy Thursday, right? Just kind of in the trenches, if you will, in agriculture is what it feels like every July. It seems like this, but, some years are worse than others. Market wise, obviously we've just kind of started the week a little bit of a bleh. But since then we've kind of, that's a technical term.
I was going to say, that's exactly what I was going to ask.
That's what we in the trade, call this week a bleh. And that's where we're at. So, headline wise, the biggest thing that I'm paying attention to today more than anything is the Brazil tariff announcement.
Yes.
And that seems like I've seen a couple different articles, and this is the worst part about the world in which we live in right now is because like in 2 minutes, an article is old anymore. Like honest to God, like you can see something, the poor people have put it all together for you. It's super informative, but, Trump's changed his mind or he never said that in the first place. That's the other thing we get sometimes. And so the tariff though, he put on Truth Social, I believe this is it is a good or it is a solid bet that he is enforcing this or whatever. So the 50% tariff, is interesting. A couple different reasons and why I think it's impactful for agriculture. First off is that you saw, the Brazilian real immediately fall apart, drop 5% at one point overnight. And one of the things or why I pay attention to that is some of the reasoning behind the slower farmer selling, that we've been hearing about so much out of South America, has been influenced by the currency. The stronger currency, of course, the farmer wants to hedge against inflation, hedge against currency weakness and some of these other things. They're going to be a little bit slower to put their, supplies into the pipeline that gets converted over to dollars when they sell it into the export market structure and some of these other things, because the price that they're receiving is less than what it would be if the things were a little bit different. And so we had seen, part of the reason that we had seen a big flush of supply into the pipeline out of Brazil, last November, December, January timeframe is that their currency had collapsed. We were really nervous about what was going on with inflation there. You just had a significant, weakening and it since had recovered. Now, I'm not saying automatically, on day one, if the currency is a little bit weaker or whatever, the farmer's just going to push this stuff into the pipeline, but it is going to be something that I'm going to be watching over the next few days if in fact it sticks. I think at this point in time, a lot of folks are looking at this and being like, okay, first off, this is weird and unprecedented, right? Because it's about, it's not to do with a trade deficit. And then this isn't a political statement. This is just kind of like what, the world is looking at in this sort of instance is, to kind of put a tariff in place mostly, or it seems at this point, to be entirely kind of based upon Bolsonaro's trial, which he was indicted like a year ago, right? Go ahead.
This is the mental thing. It's, sorry, a bit of background noise. This is the mental thing. But remember when they brought out the big boards and it was like, this is their tariff because this is the deficit, -2, carry the one. Now it's going, no, do you know what? I don't like how you're treating my mate Bolsonaro. Here, 50% done.
Yeah. Because Brazil
is mad.
Yes, it's because Brazil has a trade deficit with the U.S. We import less from them, or we export more to them than they import to, or we import from them. It's about a 2 billion dollar difference. And just kind of one of those things that's interesting to watch. It sets an interesting precedent. Like I said, it's not a political statement. It's just simply like, think about this. If the other guy were doing it, you'd raise an eyebrow. And so that's kind of the rest of the world. It's a little bit of a gut check. We talk a lot about uncertainty and the lack of clarity and some of these other things. And so when tariffs kind of go from, which this shouldn't be a surprise either, but, the tariff talks kind of gone from, okay, if you have a trade deficit with us, you can work to negotiate to settle it, to do whatever and fix it. This instance here is really just more political angling. Like, we're going to keep this 50% tariff on you until yada, yada, yada. But to me, like I said, aside from the whole like, whoa, it's a little bit of an interesting sort of step there. The biggest thing is that I'm going to be watching is what it does to the Brazilian currency and what that does to farmer selling. Because if you've been listening to this show, and I'm finally starting to see the old white dudes start saying this, so the market will probably start talking about it a bit more. Sorry if that's offensive. I don't mean it to be. It just means that it's picking up. If people are starting to discuss it more, and that is the cash market standoff that we have, kind of around the world, from a farmer who is basically looking at this market structure, looking at their P&L, looking at how much it costs them per bushel to produce these products, and they're well below that cost. And we're starting to see that the farmer can kind of get creative. There's a lot of creative, tying shoestrings together that is taking place in the Farm Belt right now, because a lot of these guys, and I think I might have said this on the show a couple weeks back, where we're like, Lieutenant Dan currently, like, you call this a storm, like, that's fine. I've been through hell before. I will continue to go through hell, and I'm not going to liquidate my supply until I absolutely have to. Now, of course, we're playing chicken. At some point, the farmer is going to have to, the rubber meets the road, and there's stuff that they have to do. But right now, we're not there. There are ways, especially with new crop supplies, that farmers can access capital. They don't have to liquidate into a market that is abusing them, at this point in time. And so you're starting to hear more about this in the EU. You have some traders that are suddenly discovering that they're short physical supply. Part of it, of course, is a bit of a slower start to harvest, but most of it is being attributed to the fact that the farmer is not liquidating like people had thought. And I've been saying this for a while, that the end user is sitting here being told constantly that they can just wait, they will receive cheaper product, and that all they have to do is be patient. And so that's what they've been doing. It's been part of why you've seen this market just relatively stagnant, is you don't have that aggressive end user covering. I mean, you've got guys that usually would buy wheat 3 months out that are still covering July, August shipment. Like, this is something that is almost unheard of. And it'll be something that we have to really kind of continue to watch, because as a trader, it gets difficult. And as you see your bid offers in all of these other things, your bid ask, start to spread, and get wider, you lose, some of that liquidity in the market. And that's kind of where we're sitting right now. But the fact of the matter is, the end user is the one who has one job, and that is they have to buy supply no matter what. And that's part of why you saw this morning, now that we're recognizing that Brazil is not shipping into this market like we thought they would, you saw a new crop, corn exports, both old and new crop, exceptionally strong. You saw new crop corn come in. I'm hoping to, one second, I lost where I was looking at on my notes here, but you saw new crop corn sales come in. Old crop corn sales come in, well above, what traders were anticipating, 300,000 metric ton above what traders were anticipating. New crop sales came in above what traders were anticipating. You're seeing old crop corn export sales outpace the current USDA's full season projection by over 50 million bushels, with 2 months left, 6 weeks left in the marketing year, and no real competition in this market. phone call. No real competition in this market, until October at this point. The market is exceptionally inverted in Brazil. The farmer is not selling. The traders aren't able to buy. They're really not able to offer much into the pipeline until October, which coincidentally comes the time where we stop paying attention to corn exports and start paying attention to bean exports. And so there's just a lot of things that we have to be watching. All of that circles back to what the hell Brazil's currency does and how the tariffs impact their economy as we move forward. So how's that for a fun and good time?
It's a really good rundown. See what I did there?
I like it. And so that's really what we're going to be watching more than anything here now. In my opinion, is just kind of how the cash market is able to cover its needs, who we are able to source from, who kind of comes in and is like, oh crap. I had thought that we would have an abundant supply of product available into this pipeline by this point. And suddenly we're not. Other things that we're seeing, other things that we're hearing that, we'll really kind of, will continue to watch, and the cash market should give us greater indications of this. Is early harvest results out of parts of the EU. It's variable. There's some that are saying, oh, it's just as good as expected. Though there is some protein problems and some of these other things, but we are hearing more out of Russia that as harvest is getting going, it's been disappointing. And so we'll be paying attention to just kind of what happens out of there. The thing with Russia is we went from like 78 million metric ton expected to 83, 84. Then all of a sudden people are talking about the potential of upwards of 90 somehow. I don't know. Apparently they got high on their own supply. And then we are now backing down to 84, 83 again, with some saying it could be lower. You did see the EU. There was a lower production expectation out of there because of how hot you guys are over that way. They took corn production here. And a lot of people will be like, well, it's early yet to cut corn production. But not with, if you look at how the weather's been, how hot it's been, how dry it's been, you've got a reduction in acreage and some of these other things. And so basically you saw 120 million bushels, close to it, about 118 million bushels trimmed off the European Union's production estimate here today, this morning. I think CONAB raised theirs a little bit, so that'll probably offset it. But it's important to remember one of the things that I've talked about a couple different times, and I'm now finally starting to see other analysts also mention this too. The USDA actually took a bigger haircut to corn harvested acres than what they traditionally would. Basically you see the USDA presents planted acreage at a certain level, and typically the harvested percentage that you see is around 91.7%, 91.8. In the June numbers, in the June 30th numbers, that was actually 91.1. And so we're down a little bit more on harvested acres than what a lot of folks are using in their little spreadsheets right now. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but at 180 bushel the acre, you're talking about 109 million bushel production reduction on new crop supply. And so between the two right there, you're talking the potential of a couple 100 million bushels off from an already tight global supply. But who the hell cares? Let's just talk about depressing bearish things, because why not? But yeah, so overall here as we wrap up this morning, we'll be watching grain flow. We'll be watching tariff threats. Hopefully we'll get some trade talk. We did see China say that all levels of trade talks are still taking place between them and the U.S. So that's supportive. We've gotten some pops in like I said, the cash market around the world. And so we're watching to see if the funds want to continue to push this thing lower on the idea that we see higher production, or if we start to kind of recognize that there are some issues out there and there could be some tightness as we move ahead. I feel like we're just starting to get real interesting in this market here, when seasonally we should be kind of quieting down. I don't know if that's going to be the case this go around. So happy Thursday. I get to head to the 4-H fair and spend some money.
There you go. Amazing. Thank you so much as always, my dear friend. Listeners, thank you as well to you guys for tuning in. We really do appreciate you. And we'll see you tomorrow for the last show of the week. Much love.
Woohoo! Have a good one.